Live now.
You say what I am.
There we go. There we go. We're live.
I'm a
Okay.
uni
We're live
lecturer and
now.
also
We are live now. Ben, you're live now. I know you thought I wasn't going to come. There we go. 5 minutes late, but I'm here. Okay, I'll just wait for people and then I'll share this live quickly, Ben. Just give me a second.
no
Are you
trouble.
happy?
I'm very happy, thank you. Yes, are you?
Are you?
That's your good flight.
I'm always happy.
I'll quote you on that.
If you see me not happy, I'll tell you I'm not happy and why. I think
You'll
it's
generally
just,
tell me, not always. One of
yeah.
your
Are you
many
happy?
good qualities.
What's that one?
You're always happy.
Always happy, but yeah, if you provoke me, I recharge at 360 degrees, 10
I have
point
not
turn.
the slightest doubt. I have not the slightest doubt.
Exactly. So be nice to me, please.
For 1 hour, I'll do my best.
Good. Good. Okay, guys, we're here again. We're here again with the COVID-19 question and answer. And Ben is going to answer all your questions. I'm just sitting here as the host. Welcome to Advocate KC's page, where Tuesdays are our educational sessions with Mr. Ben Harris, our medical microbiology and scientist, all the way from Christchurch, New Zealand, showing off, sharing, and giving us some of his knowledge based on experience. What an introduction, Ben. You're the one who's drinking the brand. Now I feel like I'm actually getting drunk from here.
Nice to be part of the audience. And I wasn't sure because for those of you listeners that don't know, Katina was at another town or city today, and she's had a very, very busy day at a hospital. And she's just flown back in. I thought she may not get in. So I poured myself a, I don't know if you can see it online there, a brandy and ginger ale, thinking she may not come, but she's turned up. And I'm sure you'll know Katina is not only a registered nurse, but she went on and did a master's degree as well
Oh,
in
Lord
nursing
Jesus,
and infection
come
control.
now.
Not only that, she gets a bit embarrassed about these things, but she got an honors degree with that. And she's also a marathon runner and an ultra marathon runner. And plus, just to keep her grounded, she's got 2 gorgeous children too. So she's a busy person, and it's good that she just made it from the airport back into the studio in time for me to drink my brandy in front of you and for her to host the show. So thanks very much, Katina.
Okay, obviously, guys, I am doing business with a man who obviously comes to do question and answers with a glass of brandy. How many percent is that brandy?
Well, the trouble is the brandy, I think, is probably about 35%, but then it had quite a lot of probably 9/10 water, which takes it down to about 3.5%. And to kill COVID, if that's what you were about to ask,
Well,
it
Ben,
may
now
need about 60%. So either I have to drink an awful lot of this until I have become 60% alcohol throughout.
oh my goodness, oh my
or
goodness.
else,
Okay,
or else it just improves my mood, and I hope I don't forget the answers, but I talk sensibly, and it'll make me happy. And happiness can help keep some of these infections at bay. So thank you.
oh my goodness. Okay, I just have to say hello to everyone. Hi guys, hi guys, hi guys. So like I said before, I always introduce this man as like one of the most valuable microbiology or medical microbiologists here in New Zealand and scientist. He actually, okay, I don't want to show off, I don't want to break too much about you, Ben, but I am just so blessed to have him as number one. What are you again? He can't even remember. No, anyway, we work together in infection prevention and control as consultants in our business. He's my business partner. If you hear me bragging and going on and on about my business partner, these are the brains that sit on my shoulders, and all I do is I talk. and he tells me what to say. No, I'm joking. But yeah,
The
no, it's
listeners
such a
will be very
privilege.
aware that you talk.
So it's such a blessing to have him kind of like willing to share his knowledge about COVID-19 with us. And if you look back, you can ask us to repeat some of the questions that he's already answered or that we've already answered. But he is here to just respond to those. And if people want to call in, Ben, what I'm going to ask you to do is to share your number instead of mine. And the reason why is because I've got earphones. And I can't disconnect this from my laptop, because if I do, I get disconnected from the radio and I don't know how to fix it. Just some technology problem. So I just want to say hello to Chido. Chido, you're one of our regulars here. Barbara Piri, so good to see you. Anzi, morning, Kate and Ben. It's actually evening over here. It's 11:07 p.m. in New Zealand, and it's Tuesday night over here. So good morning to you guys. Chido, I know it's morning over there in South Africa. Lazi T. Lazi is one of our musicians here, Ben. If you've heard me going on and bragging about this guy, Lazi T, oh my goodness, I'm going to share some of his music with you. Oh, you're going to love him. I love this guy. Like, seriously, Ben. No, Ben, hang on. I am in love with this guy. He's married, by the way.
We won't tell his wife.
He sang a song on COVID-19. I'm going to send it to you, and I think we can actually use it as an introduction. Lazi, just comment there if you're going to allow us, give us some bragging rights to use it as our intro to our show, because this is going to keep going on and on and on. So he's saying good morning, and good morning. La Mile is saying good morning, people with brains. Ben, you make me feel smart. You make me look smart.
If only I had brains. I don't. Everything's very logical in this world. That's all it is.
Oh, beautiful. I think he's talking about me, Ben. You are not beautiful. I am beautiful. Thank you so much, Lazi. Thank you for the program. You are welcome. So type in your questions, guys. La Miles says it's in England, 8:11 a.m. That's true. They're just +1 to us, but in the morning with them. He said, yes, you can use my song. So you know what? Thank you, Lazi. And
thank you, Lazi.
No copyrights here. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to start. So anyway, before we go any further, you said you're drinking brand right there. Last is Jamo. Oh, Last, he's one of my favorite fans on the radio station. And www.radio54 African Panorama, and he is just one of those guys who religiously follows and obsesses over KC. I just love you, Lasty. For no reason, I'm saying your name right now. Okay, guys, we're gonna start now. So Ben, tell me, this is a question that I think people have asked about the alcohol. Does alcohol kill COVID-19? Because people have spoken about onions, they've spoken about steaming themselves, all these things that people mention in the communities. And Africans, we just want you to answer those simple questions to start with, and then I'll go to the main questions.
Sure. Thank you, Katrina, and for the introduction. So just to be clear, things like onions, slice them up and put in a dish in a room. You can leave them for several hours and it'll make absolutely no difference whatsoever to any COVID that might be in the air. So no, the onions make no difference at all. Alcohol needs to be about 60 to 70% before it kills COVID. So when you drink alcohol, it'll make no difference at all because it's not strong enough. And in actual fact, it's a unusual part of chemistry that to have pure alcohol, either ethanol or methanol, which are alcohol, it does not work as well as when you add a little bit of water to it. It changes the chemistry of the alcohol when you add a little bit of water. So if you happen to have access to pure methylated spirits or methanol or alcohol, ethanol, it needs to be, if it is pure, if it's 100%, it needs to have water added to it to take it down to about 60 to 70% to kill COVID in the environment. It's never going to be enough to kill COVID inside our bodies. So don't use drinking alcohol as an excuse to kill COVID. Unfortunately, perhaps, but don't use it as an excuse to drink. No matter how much you drank, you wouldn't have enough. Then we also know alcohol works, but so does just for a certain type of virus, and they're called ones that enveloped viruses. They have lipids as part of their outer structure, lipids or fats, and as it happens, that includes COVID-19 as well as, which is a coronavirus, as well as influenza. They're both enveloped viruses, and liquid soap and water dissolves them. And when it dissolves them, it kills them. So that works very well too for hand hygiene. So you don't need alcohol, just liquid soap and water will kill it too. We don't actually know how much risk there is from the environment, contaminated environment. There'll be some, but it's always going to be much, much less than the risk of sharing the air of other people that happen to have COVID. And about half the people that have COVID infection will have no symptoms at all, so we don't know it. And we also have to remember, of all those that have symptoms, for about 2 to 4 days before they developed symptoms, they will be shedding, i.e. sharing their virus with anyone that's nearby to them. And even though they haven't developed symptoms yet. So we start shedding virus for 1 to 4 days before we develop COVID symptoms. But about half of people that have virus and share it never develop symptoms. Thank you, Katina.
Sorry, Ben. I was on mute.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay. So thank you for that. We've got one question that has just come. I think what I'll do is, instead of going with what I have here, what I already have, I'll just read the questions that are here so that we don't miss any, like what I did last time. So we've got a question here that says, "Hi, Casey and Ben. Please don't say my name for no reason." That's the radio tagline. Don't worry about that. I won't say your name for no reason. And anyway, Ben, please clear the air on the conspiracy surrounding hydroxychloroquine. We know this has come from that video that has been circulating in the African community. Does it cure COVID? There were quite a mixture of other ingredients in there. It was not just the hydroxychloroquine. There was something else as well. Do you mind just kind of like going through that again?
Of course.
And
I'll
your thoughts on that video,
that.
maybe just the summarized version of what your thoughts are about that video. I know we've already done a detailed PDF that I've spread to people, and I think I got into trouble with Facebook for attaching the video on that. The video on its own, they said it's false information. However, the details on top, if I post them on their own, it's okay. So yeah, you can take on that one.
Thanks, Katina. And the person whose name I won't mention, because he asked not to be, you may wish to make the PDF available for him to see, because we both spent quite a lot of time putting that together. So the thing with evidence in trialing new drugs and such like, if we have to look at this a number of ways. Most people that get COVID, or about half of them, never develop any symptoms at all. So I could say, if I did a test on 5 people or 10 people, and I gave them a lump of sugar, and 5 of them were positive for COVID when I did a test, and I gave them a lump of sugar, and they never developed symptoms, does the sugar lump work or not? By that I mean I'm just looking at chance. We know half the people that are positive for COVID on a test never develop symptoms. So sometimes we need a much larger sample than 5 before we know if something's working. And the larger the sample, the more accurate the results. That's the first thing I would say with hydroxyquinone, because we may have given them lumps of sugar, or we may have given them hydroxychloroquine, and you may have some grounds to think that both work. But it's not as simple as that. So there's a difference also between treating people who do have symptoms and yay, they get better. So if I give 100 people that have mild to moderate symptoms, and that will be near most people who have mild to moderate symptoms will be those that are under 60 years old. So if I give 100 people that have mild to moderate symptoms and have been tested positive, if I give them sugar lumps or I give them hydroxychloroquine, then they're very likely to all get better. And if they gave them a glass of water, they're very likely to all get better. So from that basis, you could say hydroxychloroquine works, you could say sugar lumps work, and you could say a glass of water works, because the vast majority of people that have symptoms with COVID get better. So that's the next important thing. The next one is if somebody is critically ill and they're an intensive care unit, then they tend to be on a number of other drugs. And the risk of giving them hydroxychloroquine when they're on a number of other drugs, if there's no really good evidence more than sugar lumps or a glass of water of working, we actually run the risk that hydroxychloroquine will in fact interact with some of the other drugs and cause them harm when they're critically ill. So the key message is the vast majority of people with mild to moderate symptoms get better regardless what we do. So the temptation can be to believe that whatever you gave them worked. And I think many of you may have seen, I hadn't seen it till the first time Katina showed me on the show last time, a very, very, very gifted, incredible speaker who's utterly passionate about what she spoke about, and she's to be acknowledged and applauded for that. But what we would call in science, which is different to faith and belief, so far in quite large trials, but not as large as we would like, the evidence does not support it at all, actually. Above when you have a controlled trial, when you treat a whole lot of people with it, with the same symptoms, compared to a whole lot of people with it that are not given anything, they have about the same recovery rates. And so at the moment, the science does not support the use of hydroxychloroquine at all. And if they're critically ill, it may in fact make them worse. Science is always moving. Belief and faith tend to be more fixed. So if there are larger, what's called controlled trials done, it's just possible they may come to a different conclusion. But at the moment, it does not look at all like it. Thanks, Katina.
Okay. All right. Hang on. I'm paying attention, but I'm responding to some of the stuff
I know that. Thank you.
that's going on here.
I they can hear when we've changed.
So yeah, no, I've got you here. Somebody's asking to say, does COVID-19? How you can't see that unless I flash
Yeah, no,
it. Okay, there you
Thank
go.
you.
Does COVID-19 cause mental health issues to the survivors long term? There we go, Ben.
That's a really interesting question. Thank you. And there is increasing evidence that it may well do. That is partially the same for many illnesses, actually. But if we get influenza, it can make us quite depressed for quite a long time afterwards. And so it's just, I'm seeing the message. Thank you for the comment. So I think mental health after any serious illness, and possibly more so after COVID, we won't know until more people are studied for longer. We always have to remember that this illness has only been in humans on Earth since November or December last year, and we're only up to the beginning of August now, and that's a very, very short time to gather good evidence. One of the things we have to be aware of is, out of a population, say, of 1 million people, there is always going to be a number that develop many different illnesses over a few months. It's going to be it's just the way life works. There's going to be a large number that develop illnesses. If they'd all had a glass of, I'll come back to my water one, if they'd all had a glass of water, could we say all those that develop mental illnesses out of that 1 million people over 3 months, it was caused because of the water? We have to be careful of causation, something that actually causes it, and correlation. You just happen to have drunk a glass of water when it happened. I don't mean to minimize it. I think that mental health issues may well be increased after COVID infections. There may be an increased incidence. So yes, I may well agree with you on that. But we'll have better data further down the line, and it will not be the only SARS infection that will develop mental illnesses either. And influenza, people often get depression after it. Thank you, Katina.
Okay, Ben, I think just like any other conditions, really, like when people are isolated for so long, because COVID-19 requires that people have to be, they need contact precautions, actually more than just contact precautions. You need to be isolated, locked away for a long time. Anyone who gets locked away, I mean, I remember my daughter actually struggled a little bit, but, you know, teenagers, they like being alone.
Yes.
In some ways it was heaven for her because she didn't have to do any housework and stuff like that. But if you know how to utilize some of that isolation time, you know, it's hard when you're an extroverted introvert like me. No, I'm not an introvert. But for people who are used to being outside, you know, you could use that time as a time to reflect, reconfigure, just, you know, meditate and find other things that you can do just to keep yourself going. Most of it, obviously, is to do with people who don't know how to cope with like the effects of isolation. And some of us, honestly, like I have to say, we got used to it, Ben, during that time when Tatiana had to be isolated.
But we got used to it.
Yeah. So if you're struggling and you've been maybe a family member has been diagnosed with COVID-19 or any other conditions that requires you to be in isolation, it's not just COVID-19. We've got so many things going on, but just knowing how to look after yourself. For those who are Christians, come on, guys, use that time to just try and reconnect with the men above. Ben, have you been praying? I won't ask you that question.
I have.
No, you can stick with your science. You know, this is quite interesting, but we won't go there.
There's an overlap of science and faith. And I just wish to add one other thing before the last person who asked the question on mental health. I just see the wording long term. COVID's only been here 8 months or so, and we won't know long term until COVID has been amongst humans long term. But sorry, I just meant to. So we only know that it may affect people for a few months at the moment, but we don't know if it'll be long term until long term occurs. Sorry, Katina, back to isolation and praying. I also just slip in there with the isolation of people with symptoms, is most infections probably actually occur in the home. I know we can pick them up in large gatherings of people or on the bus or in closed spaces where there's other people. But when we go home, that is the longest period of time we spend with shared air. So there's even some, may not be practicable, but there's some benefits to, if somebody is ill at home, ideally they'll be in a separate room, but ideally the people in that house would also wear masks to help reduce their risk of infection. But that's pretty hard to do. Thanks, Katina.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, all right. Back to, I think, okay, just so people can know what's going on with New Zealand, I think people are surprised that Katina has been traveling and she's not wearing a mask and all that. What is the current status with our New Zealand COVID-19, you know, like, I think we have been at the very bottom of the list for need for anything at all, any intervention, because we are at zero, if I'm not mistaken. What's our status at the moment?
So at the moment, we have, as far as is known, and there's a expression, pride before a fall. And so I'd hate to say we have absolutely none in the community throughout New Zealand, a population of 5 million people. We have absolutely none in the community COVID virus at all, unless suddenly a number pop up tomorrow inexplicably. But the only cases we have are New Zealanders and some essential workers who are allowed. We are in Ireland, and no cases at all, but New Zealanders have a right to come home to New Zealand, and there's something about 600,000 or 800,000 New Zealanders overseas. So when they or anybody else comes home, they have to quarantine. Now, they used to quarantine at home, but it only takes a few people to not quarantine at home, stay isolated at home, and there are a sufficient number that didn't, that it got going in the community. So now we've got rid of it in the community. Anybody that arrives in New Zealand is put up, that we have no tourists allowed in at all. So all the hotels are empty. So anyone new coming in goes into a hotel, which is currently paid for by the government, and the military and security guards guard those hotels. And anyone that breaks out goes before the courts and gets a severe fine. It's the only way of guarantee, and so the only cases we have, they are kept in isolation for 2 weeks, full quarantine, under guard in hotels throughout New Zealand. And the only cases turning up in New Zealand are those that are under guard and complete quarantine. So they have to stay in there until they've completely got over it before they're allowed to cross that barrier and be welcomed into the full community. And no cases at all. So that's good. The downside is we're very, very vulnerable too. And we will remain very, very vulnerable until either a vaccination comes or we have what's happened in the rest of the world and COVID sweeps through the whole population of New Zealand. But at the moment, it's wonderful. As Katina said, no masks, and we go about our way. We can gather in large crowds and all the rest. And it's a surreal experience when we see what's going on elsewhere in the world. Katina.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe that brings me back to the question that has been asked nearly on every live that we do. You're going to get drunk whilst you're here, Ben. But anyway, let me hurry up with the questions. But I just wanted you to sort of like go back again to the question that you answered last time before I go to the vaccine question, where we are saying we don't want to be used as guinea pigs. And I think this is something that keeps coming right now. And I'm looking at the messages from both phones. It's like, Casey, please don't let them use us as guinea pigs. Okay, I'll leave that one. But the question that I have for you is to say, there's something that you've been mentioning for the last few weeks about where people come and ask to say, can you get COVID-19 again once you've heard it? You know, and I know that I said I actually suspect that I heard it when my daughter heard it, but I didn't have any symptoms. So if you can just briefly answer that to say, can you catch it again if you had it before?
Can you catch it again? So far, the evidence shows you absolutely cannot, at least for 8 months. We're protected. Nobody at all has been reliably proven to catch it again. Now, I just add in there, if you look up the internet, you may see some cases, including in South Korea, where some people were suspected to have caught it again. But even the South Koreans have now, I think, admitted that maybe no test is perfect, and there may have been some testing issues with that. So the good thing at the moment is everyone's under pressure, and if we find something new, it gets published in scientific journals, but it doesn't go through the full and longer process that ideally it would. So some of those initial journal publications are subsequently found to be not accurate. So that just confuses the literature, but it's worth it to keep having all the early publications put out so we do get informed of what may be happening. But some of them are inaccurate. At the moment, no, you can't catch it twice, but we only know that is so for as long as humans have been catching it, which is about, well, since effectively the beginning of the year. So for about 8 months, nobody has caught it twice. We don't know if in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, people will start catching it again or not. Katana.
Right. Thank you, Ben. We're going to keep this within our time frame, right? 30 minutes. Well done, Ben. Okay, good.
I can slip in there if you like on antibodies. Do you want me to slip in there?
Okay, I'll mute myself. Go on.
Okay, with antibodies, which is our immunity. So after we get COVID virus, we produce antibodies. How long do they last is the catch. How long do they last? Because that will be the immunity. But it's not the only immunity, and I'll come back on that. We know when primates, monkeys, have been infected with COVID-19, they start losing their measurable antibodies after about 6 months. They start losing it. And with humans, we also know that after 6 months, it looks as though they're going to start losing their antibodies too. However, there's more to immunity than just antibodies. There's another complex part of our immunity, including called T cells. T for T-shape. T cells. Not sure, just to make sure. You can see that. And T cells, things like monocytes, which is a type of white cell, which can also engulf and kill viruses, including COVID virus. So we may have lost our antibodies and not necessarily have lost our immunity. So we know with the vomiting and diarrhea virus, for instance, called norovirus, when we catch norovirus and vomiting and diarrhea, the immunity, both the antibodies and these other T cells, they no longer protect us after 4 to 6 weeks only. So you can recatch norovirus again 4 to 6 weeks later. We know that seasonal influenza, our immunity only lasts until the end of the year. So it only lasts one year, if you like. We know hepatitis B, when we get vaccinated, fully vaccinated with 3 shots, most of us, not all of us, but 93 out of 100 of us, develop antibodies to hepatitis B. They're called hepatitis B surface antibodies. And they last for about 8 years only, and then they disappear. We used to give boosters to booster vaccine, but we now know that immunity from hepatitis B, even though we've lost our antibodies, lasts our entire life, unless we're immunocompromised or on dialysis. So once we're vaccinated hepatitis B, we lose our antibodies after 8 years, but we're still immune. Measles vaccine, we have 2 shots, MMWR, mumps, measles, rubella, and then that 98 out of 100 people are immune to measles for the rest of their lives. So some infections are short, some are long. We know COVID antibodies probably last for about 6 months to a year, and then they go. Whether we become infected again after that, we don't know. We know that colds, when we get a cold, a number of those are coronavirus, and the immunity from that only lasts for a few months and goes, and we can catch the cold again. Thanks, Katana.
Thank you, Ben. Multitasking here is my middle name. Okay. All right. Now, I think we're going to come to the last question that I have here. This is about, there's a lot of talk about vaccinations at the moment. And I don't think New Zealand is actually in need of this vaccination because we are okay without it. But For those who are asking, I think the main concern at the moment that's coming is, you know, how I think we mentioned this nearly on every one of our sessions, where people say, why do you want to test it on Africans? We are not guinea pigs. And is there any need, considering that the highest number of cases was found in Italy or in China and America and stuff like that? So why is there really, I think the questions have come with, will a vaccine solve all our problems? And somebody said, how safe is a vaccine for COVID-19? And somebody says, how long does the protection last if the vaccine comes? And yeah, so I'm going to ask you one question at a time, and I'll just type it up down here so that people know which one you're answering. But we are not guinea pigs in Africa. Ben, tell your fellow medical microbiologists and all their cats and dogs that Africans are not guinea pigs, and they should keep their vaccines wherever they are developing them. But anyway, so I'm going to ask you this question. Okay.
But before you ask the question, I'll just come in on that because it's really important. I think, in my understanding and not reading lots, that Africans have been exploited as a nation and individual countries many times, and ongoing now many times, for minerals and other such thing, but also for pharmaceutical drug trials and such like. And I think they have been used as guinea pigs. That's just from my biased look at it without looking at it much. And there's no doubt of that. And it is utterly appalling. As far as vaccines go, when the ideal, if there's trouble, we'll say in New Zealand gets a new infectious disease, there is absolutely no benefit at all. If New Zealand is the only country in the world that has it, it's totally irresponsible to only test Africans with the vaccine. That's totally unconscionable. And I think it may have happened with different illnesses in the past, and it's utterly unacceptable and unethical. However, if there's a worldwide infection, as in a pandemic like COVID, then different races and different people and different behaviors and cultures and different temperatures and humidities will all have different responses to that particular infection. And so then it becomes important to test the vaccine, any new vaccine that seems to be pretty safe because it's been tested on animals and small numbers of people. It's then best to test it across as many different nations as possible that have an active infection. So at the moment, New Zealand has no COVID. There's no point trying to test a new vaccine in New Zealand, because it may show we've developed antibodies, and incidentally, not all antibodies protect us against infection. But there's no point testing a new vaccine in a population that does not have the infection. The ideal place to test it is in a population and those countries that have a lot of increasing, in this case, COVID virus. And the reason for that is there may be 10,000 people. You divide, we know it's rapidly increasing, and you divide 10,000 people out of a city of 1 million, you divide volunteers into two groups. 5,000 will be given the new vaccine if the initial tests have already shown that it's likely to be safe, and they agree to it, and 5,000 will be injected with something else, sterile, saline, or water. And nobody knows, including the people that are injecting them, whether it was actually vaccine they got or whether it's what's called a placebo, the sterile saline. And then at the end of that, you can tell, yes, that vaccine in your particular race or your particular population or community is 10%, 20%, 50%, 90% effective. So at that stage, we're all guinea pigs. We have to trial it and see before we know how effective it'll be. Katina.
You spoke about New Zealand probably has developed antibodies. Is there a way to test to see if we've developed antibodies? Because I know it might be an expensive,
Yes, there is a test for antibodies, and there are quite a few fake ones out there too. So that's a bit of a trouble. There are some tests for antibodies, and it would be nice to know if you had the antibodies. So Katina, her daughter had it, and Katina had the infection. And Katina thinks she probably had it, and I agree with her because she shared the same air as her daughter in the same house. She may well have had it. The only way to know for sure is if she was to have a blood test. If it happened to be one of the reliable ones looking for antibodies, then she would know if she had in fact been exposed to it. Otherwise, she wouldn't know. And so that becomes the only benefit of knowing is, yes, she's had it and she's probably currently protected from getting it again. Although when we get the illness seriously, when we're really ill, it's been shown we get far more antibodies if we get really ill. So if you've got far more antibodies, they will probably last for longer. If you haven't got so many antibodies, then it's probably not going to last as long. It might only be, I'm utterly making it up, 4 months rather than 9 months. And I see this guinea pig question keeps coming up a lot, which is understandable through what your nation has been through in the past. I think there is another issue with vaccines. To test them really well in the past, they've taken 5 to 10 years to develop a brand new vaccine. So on Earth, I have to say, we're all going to be vaccines, we're all going to be guinea pigs if we consider trying them. Already the pharmaceutical companies developing the vaccines have said, we're showing it safe in animals, we're showing it safe in 5 people, we're saying it's safe in 100. We're now trying it on 10,000 people around the world, volunteers, and you can call all of them guinea pigs if you like. They may well be paid for it. I'm not sure. They may well be paid for it, but they're in different places in the world. But we don't know how safe until we've tried it on millions and millions of people. So the choice may be, if 10,000 people have developed really good antibodies after this new vaccine, are you going to refuse, and it's been safe for that 10,000 people, if you really don't want to be a guinea pig, then you wouldn't have the vaccine for another 5 or 10 years. But in the meantime, the vaccine may have saved many millions of lives. And already the pharmaceutical companies are saying, we want to be indemnified before we release this to the public. And the governments in general, including I think the New Zealand government, but I stand to be corrected on that, have already said, yes, we'll indemnify you if there is some risk with it. But the risk might only be 3 per million or 1 per million. We don't know yet. But 1 per million risk from vaccine would probably be a lot better than 100 per million that died of COVID. Katina.
I'm just finding this unusual offer to be a guinea pig. I haven't seen any African who says, I want to be a guinea pig, unless maybe Lamile or LAH Mile is the reason, because they might be offering some money to go with it. Ben, I don't know, because I think it's just quite unusual that this virus has not been around for a long time. And like you said, it takes about 5 to 10 years to develop a vaccine. So how does...
If all the initial testing was showing, I put it to you, because of your age, and I'm not sure if your age is old or young, but and then there's other things always to consider with the vaccine. Do you have underlying health conditions? Do you have a high blood pressure? Do you have respiratory troubles? Are you very overweight? Do you have kidney troubles? All those will change the outcome of if you have COVID, and it may change the outcome if you have, if you get the vaccine, it may change the outcome. I'm trying to read some of these as well. So there's probably sufficient, you have to put yourself, if you were the pharmaceutical company that was, and there are hundreds of different people, different researchers around the world trying to develop a vaccine. If you if you're going out to 100,000 people and you'd already spent from donations and other things 100 million United States dollars developing the vaccine as far as you have, and it's looking safe so far on 1,000 people, the next 10,000 people may say, I'm happy to try a vaccine without being paid, and or people may be sufficiently nervous. Some may say, I'll only take the vaccine if I am paid. If you're the pharmaceutical company, you'd probably, if there's more than enough people trying to offer for free, then you'd test the free ones first. So that it's not straightforward. The elderly maybe was one of your other questions, because the person that volunteered had said no. But how old? In general, our immune system.
He is old and he has some underlying health issues. So I'm just flashing his response. Oh yeah, there we go. 65 years, which is borderline right there. And
okay.
yeah.
I just have to put it in perspective. That is when the serious infection rate starts going up. And so the underlying health issues would mainly need to be high blood pressure or respiratory, coughing type issues with the lungs, or diabetes, or kidney conditions. But it is still low at 65 years old. It's the 70s and 80s where the death rate or mortality rate actually starts going up lots. But even then, 90% of them will still survive. So we just have to keep these numbers. Even if you're 70 years old and you had underlying health conditions and you caught COVID, depends which way you look at it. 90 out of 100 will survive, 10 out of 100 will die. So 90% survival rate still. So we just have to be careful. Yes, definitely increased risk, but it is not a guaranteed death sentence at all. Unless probably your underlying conditions were currently so severe that you may well have died within the next 12 months regardless. Then clearly it is more likely to hasten things along. So we need to know, and we don't know yet because it's too early, do the new vaccines, and there are many of them, new types being developed around the world, different types. We need to know, will they work in the elderly? Because many vaccines do not work so well in their elderly, and they're the people that need it most. So the influenza vaccine only reduces an over 65-year-old's chances of catching influenza each year by about 20%. That's 20 out of 100. It will reduce their chances of infection. Whereas influenza for under 65-year-olds, still not that good actually, but it protects them about 60 times out of 100. Thank you, Katina.
Ben, I think also we're talking about the underlying, sorry.
That's right.
Also, hi Chido, hi Sally. These are some of your regular people that come here to watch, to listen to you, Ben.
Thank you. And you too, Katina.
Pardon?
And you too, of course.
Oh, well, do I have a choice? I can't keep up.
You do it very well. You do it very, very well. I'm impressed.
Okay, there we go. I think he's saying something there. I was going to ask something else. Not severe at all. I am not on any medication except my own herbal medication.
That's fine. So if it's not severe at all, you're likely to be much more than what you're fearing. You've got a 95% chance of survival, which is if you happen to catch it. So yeah, just bear that in mind.
Okay,
Be mindful, but don't get too depressed about it. Be mindful, think positively, good night's sleep, good varied diet, especially plant-based products included within there, and positive thoughts definitely have an effect. Katina.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I just thought of something because this has come through as a question through my WhatsApp here. Somebody's asking to say, okay, Ben, what if I've got HIV/AIDS? Should I be more worried of not being able to survive HIV compared to like someone who is not infected with HIV? What's your take on that one, Ben?
It's a really good question, and HIV has clearly affected Africa more than many nations. I haven't specifically looked up if there's any research on HIV yet, so I stand to be corrected. But in general, HIV infection, or the condition of HIV, makes people more predisposed to most infections unless it is well managed. When it's well managed, and if you have access to those medications, then you're not as predisposed to catching other infections. That's the first thing. So HIV is now, when the medications are there, has become a manageable chronic condition of which you are likely to have a relatively normal lifespan. So that's the first thing to be certain about. The next thing is, unusually with this particular infection, COVID-19, when we get the infection, as for all infections, it's the symptoms that cause us humans the trouble. So the temperature, the swelling, the hot, the coughing, that is the symptoms rather than the actual bug itself. That's the symptom. So our immune system is provoked by a microbe, by an infection. Our immune system is provoked to respond, and they're the symptoms, the temperature and such like, and the coughing. With COVID-19, our immune system does not only respond when it does and we have symptoms, but it seems to set off almost hyper or huge symptoms, a bit like somebody who's really, really allergic to something. So even a relatively small dose of COVID virus, we seem to overreact to. Now, it's been shown that unusually, people that are immunosuppressed, so people that have a lower immune system, for COVID virus, they have some advantage in not getting symptoms as badly. So any other infection, I'd think, oh, HIV makes you more predisposed. It's just well possible that HIV may happen to make you a little bit less exposed. So it's there've got to be some good things with an infection like HIV, and it won't be a lot, but it just may move it a little bit. But I haven't seen the specific data on that. We know anti-inflammatories and such like reduced dexamethasone can reduce the symptoms, and it's the symptoms that tend to kill us with COVID. Katina, thank you.
Okay, so Ben, back to the COVID-19 vaccine as we come to the close. 3 questions that we asked. Will a vaccine solve all our problems? Question number 1. So, okay, everyone is talking about this vaccine.
Will it solve all
Is
our
it going to
problems?
solve all our problems?
And note those 2 letters very, very carefully. If the vaccine is safe, and I've talked through that, and we won't know till we've tested how safe it is until we've tested 500,000, 1 million, 2 million people, we'll have a better idea of how safe it is then. And that hasn't happened yet. The trials are probably only up to 100,000 or so. So it's got to be safe as number one. It has to be effective. So is it only effective in under 20-year-olds, or only by effective I mean ideally we want something that stops you getting COVID 100% of the time. Once you've had the vaccine, you cannot catch COVID. If it is only 50% effective, then half the people that have been vaccinated will never get it, but the other half are just as likely to get it. So that would be 50% effective. As I said, influenza ranges over 65-year-olds, about 20% effective. Under 65-year-olds for influenza, 60 to 70% effective. For measles, it's about 98% effective. Measles lasts for life. So effective, it will be best because most people that die of COVID are over 63 years old. Even though most survive, most people are over 63-year-old. Under 63-year-olds are much, in terms of percentage, are much less likely to die unless they've got significant underlying illness. So ideally it will be effective, and for the effective, especially for the elderly, they're the group most likely to die. But even if it was effective, very effective for under 63-year-olds only, if all the under 63-year-olds were vaccinated, then that would largely stop the over 65-year-olds getting it, because we would have a herd immunity within the general community. So effective is the second point you raised. The third point is ideally, how often would we need to revaccinate to keep that effectiveness up? And would we have to do it every year like influenza? Would we need one shot only? Or would we need 2 vaccine shots like measles? And ideally it would be 99% effective and last for the rest of our lives. I think that may not happen, but we don't know. Even if it came, if we were to vaccinate everybody on Earth, we would need 8 billion vaccine shots. But if people needed 2 doses to be effective, then we'd need 16 billion vaccine shots. So 16 billion syringes, 16 billion needles, 16 billion vials to put it in. There are a lot of ifs in there. Then who gets it first? In practice, those countries, dare I say it, like the United States, that have poured the most money into developing it, they can also pay the most for it. And so they would most likely vaccinate their own population. Let's face it, if Africa found a vaccine first, it's going to vaccinate its own population first. After that, the countries that most need would probably get vaccinated next. So somewhere like New Zealand, that currently has no cases, the rest of the world will say, well, they don't need it, do they? It may be crippling our economy, but clearly New Zealand doesn't need it at the moment, even though we're incredibly vulnerable. And just at the moment, it's just possible that maybe Africa doesn't need it as much as some other countries, because just at the moment, and it may be a little bit early to tell, that other than the areas of South Africa, the rest of Africa, for reasons that are far too early to know whether it's actually so or not, their immune systems may possibly be better than elsewhere in the world. And so it may, I put the emphasis on may, not, and there's some papers indicating that it may not hit as hard as you're preparing for and imagining in your worst thoughts. You may have a better immune system than the wealthy countries who have become a bit mamby-pamby by taking all these drugs all the time, which has affected their immune systems. And I leave you with that to think about vaccine. Katina.
I forgot that I was on mute. Sorry. I think that kind of like brings us to the end of tonight's program, Ben. Unless you've got
Yeah.
anything else to add. I mean, there's quite a lot of other things that people are suggesting and asking, but I think we'll move it to next week.
Next time.
And
I really enjoy the questions. As I appreciate everyone's questions. Thoroughly enjoy doing this now. So thank you very much, Katina, for having me on. I hope everybody's learned something from it. And thank you for hosting it, Katina. It's been wonderful.
Okay, now I was just reading a message. Now I'll leave it for next time. But yeah, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. And guys, I know that the time that we kind of like do the show is not ideal for most people, but I hope that people can catch up with this. We are doing exactly an hour and just cut it off there, because I think if we do longer hours, it's just hard for people to kind of like catch up with the questions and the answers that we're giving. So thank you for watching, and for those who watch this afterwards, just type in your questions and we can carry them over to next week. Just so you know, this is not just about COVID-19. We're just doing COVID-19 because it's the hot topic at the moment. You can bring in questions about anything, and I know in Africa we have so many questions about HIV and all that. We have so many questions about like even some of the gastros that are happening at the moment. I know in New Zealand we've got lots of this norovirus and all. I don't know what's happening in Africa, whether they are quite familiar with that. To be quite honest, when I used to work in Zimbabwe as a nurse, I had never heard of the word norovirus in my whole entire life until I came to New Zealand. So
And also, just adding in, if some people are asking questions of Katina, typing them in and asking beforehand, that can give me a little bit of time to do some research in relating it to Africa as well. So that makes I can give you a better informed answers if you're asking Katina some questions beforehand. Sorry, Katina.
Yep. And Ben, you just got nominated in New Zealand for something, haven't you? I can brag about that.
No, may or may not happen. So we just leave off that at the moment.
Okay, yeah, the man with brains. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And yeah, I am exhausted. And I am just going to sign out of here and look after my mental health and my kids who keep knocking on my door. So thank you so much. Catch up again sometime, maybe tomorrow, which is tonight, Zimbabwean time. But that'll be my tomorrow. I'm going to sleep right now. I'm just going to have a shower and go to sleep. Are you drunk now?
No, I'll finish the last part of this, and then I'll go down and have some dinner. I didn't have any lunch. I'll go down and have some dinner. And but thank you to all the viewers. Thank you, Katina, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope everyone has got some benefits from it. So take good care and do what you know is right, and enjoy life.
That is, if we will enjoy life if we don't end up, all dying from the vaccine trials. I'm joking, Ben. I'm going to sign out.
Don't spoke
Thanks,
people that don't need to be.
Okay, Chido, I'll catch you in the inboxes. I actually need to talk to you about something. All right, we're going to end this, Ben. 1 hour, 2 minutes. That's right. Well done. Timekeeping, Broch will be impressed. She said, KC, nothing more than 1 hour. I just went above by 2 minutes. So, yeah. Go rest now, right? You know me too well. I need to rest. And I think I want to make it at least 8 hours so that I can go for a long run tomorrow. Thanks, Shido. I'll see you in inbox. All right, Ben. I'm signing out.